equity or debt? An investor's circumstances will often determine the path forward, but as you progress with investing, many develop a strong opinion on the matter. Adam Messmer, you're back at the Loan Lounge 2025.
2025, in the middle of the polar vortex. As you can see, I'm not wearing a Hawaiian shirt. I mean, I have one underneath. Always, yeah.
And you can see that I am prepping for a cruise.
Yeah.
Because I leave
on
Monday.
On Monday.
So I'm just like living it right now. I don't care if there's a foot of snow outside. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. No, totally. Because you're going to be in the Bahamas or Caribbean or something like that.
Somewhere warm. That's all that matters.
Somewhere warm, sweating it out, having a cocktail.
If you know anything about me, I'm traveling as often as humanly possible. So
all the time.
Yeah. But I think 2025, we're talking about like equity plays, like what type of investors do we typically run into? What kind of mindsets do they have? All the things.
Yeah. I mean, there's a big question it's like, how much leverage should you really use when you're investing?
Yeah.
And I feel like we run the gamut. We see people that are trying to leverage everything they've got just to get into the property so that they can start growing equity on the back end or get, maybe it's a cash flow play or what have you. But it's all over the place. I would say maybe earlier investors are going to be more comfortable with larger amounts of leverage. And by leverage, we're talking about LTV. So that's loan to value. So are you at 80% loan to value, 90% loan to value? How much loan are you using in the transaction to get it done and get it written? And
this leverage will play a factor in, if this is a flip, how much are you making on the back end potentially? Yep. And what your down payment's looking like. So we get a lot of, I would say baby investors that, their cash positions may be a little bit smaller, and their goal is as little down payment as humanly possible. And like, there's benefits to that. Yeah, you can get into this deal with a little money out of pocket, but your margins are probably also very small on those transactions. So it's just being smart about, the structure of your transaction is huge. Like making sure that you kind of keep yourself to, this is a good deal in my eyes, and this is what I'm willing to, take on if this is the case. I would say our more established investors are less focused on those high leverage positions.
Oh, yeah.
They're perfectly fine if they're sitting at, 50, 60, 70% LTV. But it's because they've been in the biz long enough. One, they're also probably in a cash position that's a little bit more comfortable, and have that cash to put in. And they tend to keep their notes longer, their loans in place longer.
And why would you? What's the point of having lower leverage? What do you think?
Well, market corrections can happen at any time. Like none of us have the crystal ball. We talk about our special order to Amazon all the time of the crystal ball coming. It's not here yet. But a market correction could happen tomorrow. Rates could skyrocket tomorrow. Maybe not exactly overnight, but very quickly. Even in the last, actually we had a sales meeting, and in the last 3 months, we have seen an increase of almost a full percentage point in interest rates. And so that can happen. 3 months is not that much time. And so with that, you just need to be mindful of the position that you have your properties on, because if a market correction was to happen, if values were to drop, the leverage that we put you in the loan on is no longer the leverage that you're actually at. And what if you need to sell? What if a life situation happens and you were hoping to grab that money that you put into this deal and help with a family emergency, health related, whatever? You may not have that position any longer. That money, you almost need to earmark that money as being gone.
Yeah. And on a very basic level, if you're brand new to this and you're not aware, lower LTVs are going to get you lower rates.
That too.
So that's a big thing. That's a big driver for a lot of our established investors. It's like, I'm looking at, rates in the high 7s for 80% loan to value right now. And that's January 2025. And then high 7s, low 8s. And then I would say I'm doing one for 60%, a cash out refi for 60%. And we're at 6.775 on that one. And that's a bigger loans. So that's
Yeah.
that's an aspect of it. So
And
I
like
mean,
pricing tends to be similar. I mean, like under 65 is kind
Yeah.
of that sweet spot. So if you're kind of wanting, okay, at what LTV do I need to get that like premium pricing? I would say
60.
65, 60.
Yeah.
You know, once you get under there, the adjustments are small at best because
Mm-hmm.
there are floor rates.
Yep.
Meaning that lenders will have a rate that they have to charge. So
Mm-hmm.
even if like technically the way that the pricing plays out, you would get a lower interest rate, the banks will establish a floor that no matter what, this is what you're paying. This is the lowest interest rate that we offer no matter what. Some of you may not know that.
Yeah.
So it's little things like that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I always reference this very often as I tend to run into two different types of investors. Ones that are wanting to pay off their notes as quickly as possible, maybe using like a Dave Ramsey approach kind of concept. They're not comfortable with debt. They want this gone as soon as humanly possible. And then I have the others that are like leverage. And sometimes I feel like that's maybe age driven. You know, you get that younger baby investor that's like, I don't even have a portfolio yet. Like I'm barely started. Yes, I'm going to need the loans. One, they'll need it. But two, this will allow me to continue scaling. And I do think at some age point it turns. Or if you're starting at a certain spot, it changes where then it's like, well, shit, I have all these loans. I'm going to need to dissolve these loans and really get rid of them over time so that I'm, you know, getting that overall rent in full rather than having all this debt at retirement. So
There's a book that I'm trying to remember the name of it. I want to say it's called like The Power of Debt or something like that. And I will get the name of it and we can maybe put it in the show notes or something. But what's wild about it, we read it back in when I was in wealth management with the big banks, and it was really crazy because this guy, he takes an example of three different families: a family that uses zero debt, a family that uses moderate debt, and a family that leverages a lot, and shows like based on his assumptions where they end up. And in his model, the people that take on the most debt end up in a really good position by the time that they retire, because the money that they are, that excess cash, rather than paying down the debt, what they're doing is they're investing it in a vehicle that would pay more than what the debt costs. And so that's really interesting. So, I mean, it's not real estate specific, although real estate is a major component of it because typically the largest loans that you take out are for mortgages. So, but yeah, we'll get a link to that in the description when I can think of the name of the book.
And I would say similarly to that, you know, there's this thought process of like, sure, if you're going to this, like, I want to pay off my loans, you may have less doors, so like buildings, properties, but they're paid off, so the risk is a little bit more comfortable there compared to, hey, this person that's leverage, they 100% have more doors than you. Their cash flow is less. I would say it just depends when you start investing as to who is technically in the best position. I'm net worth, probably the person with more doors. Monthly cash flow, probably still maybe that person. But also I think like too often, especially in social media, I feel like that driver is because of influencers in the market that are driving, hey, this is what you should be doing. No, there's no Bible to this. There's no, and even us having this conversation is more so to give you the platform of understanding what others are doing. But when it gets down to it, your goals are what you put in place. It's what you desire. It's what you and your family are trying to accomplish. And sometimes I think it's thinking about this a little bit more simply of like, are we trying to replace a W-2? How can we do that? Those kind of simplistic things rather than trying to accomplish this, you know, insane goal that someone else put in place. Let's make note of, oh, I want to own 100 doors. Do you? Do you know what that entails? Like, do you understand what those moving parts really are? Or did someone on social media tell you so? And that's where you're kind of going down that rabbit hole.
And that's such a big, I love what you said about there's no Bible for this, because that's true. I mean, there are some guidelines and there are some good rules to kind of move by, but you've got to work within your own comfort level. there's a story that I think I've told before on the podcast about a kid that we were refinancing out of hard money. It was like this whole odyssey. It was really crazy. Long story short, we did the hard money for him. He went through this rehab that was very painful for the kid. And then we were down to close on the refinance into the DSCR loan to get him out of the hard money. And we had sent the notary out to his house at 9:00 at night, and the notary calls me at 9:30, and she's like, he didn't sign. I'm like, what do you mean he didn't sign? And I called him like, what's going on? He's like, bro, I put it into the Bigger Pockets calculator, and it said no. And I'm like, you have a house. This is, I mean, if you walk away from this now, you're going to lose like tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Just because it doesn't hit some kind of metric on Bigger Pockets calculator doesn't mean that you should walk away. I mean, those are hypothetical tools.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's a tool that you should have used at the beginning of the
sure.
transaction.
Oh, yeah.
Not at this point. You're already in it, buddy.
Oh, yeah.
You're already in it.
Yeah. So not being beholden to kind of the dogmatics of it, I think is really important.
Yeah. You just gotta, you really just have to slow down the process, get your systems in place, figure out what works for you and your household,
and
grow from there.